This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. With your hosts, Brendan Spinner, Michael Burns, and Kyle Rose.
And welcome into another edition of Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I am Brandon Spinner alongside Michael Burns. We are going to do another bourbon review today. Mikey, how you doing on this day?
I'm doing all right. Weather's nice. We'll see how this bourbon tastes.
Yeah, bourbon mixed with Irish whiskey. Today's whiskey of the day in the whiskey review is Keeper's Heart. It's an Irish plus bourbon whiskey. So I don't think we can technically call this bourbon, even though we are a bourbon and baseball podcast. We're a whiskey podcast, basically. The bourbon and the baseball, just the bees, right?
Bourbon and alcohol.
Well, we've got the bees on the podcast today as well, Brandon and Burnsy, as we're going to do the B&B, bourbon and baseball, baseball and bourbon, or Brandon and Burnsy. Keeper's Heart. It's a Irish plus bourbon, so this is blended together. This is a distillery and a bottle that I've seen pop up more and more on social media the last couple of weeks. I'm hearing a lot more about it. Have you seen much about this at all, Michael?
I've seen it on social media, so props to their marketing or social media people who are pushing the reach. Because otherwise, I would have never heard of this. But it has been popping up on Instagram. I've seen a couple of our friends seeing that they've received either a sample or a bottle. But haven't seen, like, if I Google this Keeper's Heart Irish Bourbon, there's not articles flooded to review. So I'm excited to try it.
The first time I saw anything about this, I subscribed to an email, page. I think they send you a daily email just with some links. It's called Elevator. I saw it, I think it was back in March. Didn't think much of it. And I was like, oh, cool, another bottle. And then I listened to Carmen and Yurko, their sports talk radio show out of Chicago. They do some sponsorships with some different alcohol here and there. If they go live, they'll go out on remotes. And that was when I heard of them again. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I really look into Carmen DeFalco a lot. He's a huge whiskey guy. I've been listening to him since the early 2000s on the radio, it seems like, coming from Chicago. So I really respect his opinion, and he seems to be a fan of this. And a big thank you to Keeper's Heart for sending us this bottle to try. As I mentioned already, it's an Irish and bourbon whiskey blended. This is coming from O'Shaughnessy Distilling Company, which is not overseas. It is actually in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The cool part of all of this is, do you know who the master distiller is, Michael? This might blow your mind.
I don't. I was going to ask you. I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay. His name is Brian Nation, and that may not jump off the page to you, but he was actually in charge of Jameson and Redbreast overseas.
Okay.
So
Those
they pulled
are two
him over.
Irish whiskeys, I know.
Yeah. So big name in the Irish whiskey world. So he's now coming overseas here in Minneapolis, and he's on this side of the pond, if you want to call it that, at O'Shaughnessy Distillery, which is actually built now in an old potato factory, which is one of the key features to Irish-style whiskey. So they've got 3 beautiful copper pot stills that they make their whiskey out of, or their Irish whiskey. So that is really the heart of the distillery there. And what was that follow-up question?
Is this their own Irish whiskey that they're blending it with? I know some of the stuff I've tried that's either finished in Irish whiskey, like this Heaven's Door that was finished in Redbreast. So that's kind of cool now to hear that it's the Redbreast former master distiller or master taster.
He is a master distiller. Yeah. So
master distiller.
Okay,
cool.
It sounds like it is their own Irish whiskey, just because they brought him over. It doesn't say much as I dive into that. He is considered one of the finest master distillers in the world. So they, the 3 people who started this, Michael, Patrick, and Jerry, who are the founders of O'Shaughnessy Distilling Company over there in Minneapolis. They were sitting there drinking, and they were like, "Hey, let's start this up." So they went over there, they talked to him, and they brought him again, as I mentioned, overseas here. Now, I'm going to describe the bottle. It is a pretty cool looking bottle. It's got a black label. That's because that's the bourbon. The regular whiskey blend with Irish whiskey is a white label. But what you'll notice on all of their bottles is their logo front and center. It's Keeper's Heart in white lettering. And as you see, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that that is a gold or bronzish color of the middle of the logo. And there's actually some big elements to this logo, and it tells the entire story of the distillery and what they're trying to go with here, which is kind of cool. The word keepers represents the desire to cherish the important elements of life, the loved ones, time, and traditions. It's a tip of the cap to the community whose mission is to serve the world's barkeepers. The second part, the heart, they say everything they do comes from the heart, right? Everything we do as humans kind of comes from the heart. It's the passion, it's that honesty. They carefully select the heart of the distillation. So it's hard to see, but there's a clock on the logo right there in the middle. That clock represents the specialness of time spent together and a reminder of the family to enjoy every moment. Fugit Hora, which is on the outsides, the hour flies, is the family motto. So it's a reminder to just slow down and enjoy the moment, right? A lot of the times in life, we don't enjoy the now. We're always planning for the future. So that's kind of cool.
That's what drinks are about. Sharing drinks with each other is to sit down, share a drink, and enjoy each other's time.
Yeah, and enjoy that moment. And then there's two...
Bourbon is for sharing.
Yes. And there are two crossing keys. Those keys are the invitation from the family to join their family. I look forward to unlocking experiences together, which is where you have that pour, right? You sit down and you enjoy things together and you unlock that experience. And then the last one, right at the top, if you can see that on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're streaming this via one of the ways we stream our podcasts, there is a castle-looking figure right at the top of the logo. Every castle has a keep, and that keep is the innermost sanctum of where the family's most prized possessions are kept, and their keep represents the specialness of the liquid created by Master Distiller Brian Nation. So really cool. I love the intricacies.
A lot to that. I thought you just kept going on that logo.
Yeah, you look at a logo and you're just like, oh, that's cool. But I love hearing the story. There's always a story, but this is very thoughtful and deep behind the messages of all of this, and just really cool stuff. So I'm really excited to try this. Again, a big thank you to those of you over at Keeper's Heart for sending this our way. This is a 92 proof. What makes this a little more unique of a bottle, Michael, is it's only 700 milliliters. It's not your standard 750. Oh, let me get my new glass.
Yeah, pull up their site. They've been winning a lot of international spirits competitions, scoring high in other ones.
Okay, there's the pour.
I'm going to give this guy a nose.
Yeah, it's not the darkest of liquids. It's got a little bit more of a yellowish tint. You know what?
Irish whiskey.
Yeah, you know what it actually kind of looks like to me is the mellow corn. When you look at a mellow corn bottle from Heaven Hill, I saw the reaction. What was your first thought?
On the nose?
Mm-hmm.
So you'll hear a lot of reviews that say, "Man, I'm really pulling out grandma's apple pie or something." Mm-hmm. This is the first sniff I've ever had where I actually smell pie.
Yeah.
I smell like not apple pie, but I smell pie. I can't pull exactly what kind of pie, but it smells like dessert.
So the first thing I noticed when I popped the bottle open, I got a very big hint of pear. Like, that's the first thing I noticed. You mentioned pie, almost pulling kind of a rhubarb. There's a very random one that I wouldn't have expected, but a rhubarby.
I've never pulled pie, and I like, you hear it, but I've never like, oh yeah, sure, okay, buddy, that's what you smell and taste. But this is freaking pie in a glass right here on the nose. It
smells delicious. That's the first thing I would say. 92 proof again, so it's not going to blow you away. I get a lot of pear. That's what I keep getting every time I go back.
Yeah, but I don't anticipate being spicy based off the nose.
No.
All right, I'm going to take a sip.
That's good. Wow. That is interesting.
It's got a lot going on.
Yeah, they're
it's changing.
We're on the same page there. They're like, it starts sweet. I got some pepper in the middle, and then it changed. Oh, very hard to describe this one. I got to go back for another sip.
I do get being more bourbon, and there is a specific Scotch Irish whiskey taste. I do get that. Even taking the sip and then breathing out the nose as I'm doing my chew, I get that Irish whiskey feel in my airway a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I got pepper off the beginning. I mentioned it was in the middle, but right off the tip, there's like a peppery pear. I don't get too much of the oak. I don't get too much even wood.
Yeah, try not to focus on the Irish whiskey part.
Right.
It does get floral.
A little bit. This isn't a cheat because I'm looking at it on the website, but Tootsie Roll is a good explanation for me. It's on their website.
You get a little bit of chocolate on it? Yeah, you get a little bit of chocolate out of that?
Yeah, Tootsie Roll for sure. I was trying to figure out what it was. I went to the website to go see what their tasting notes were, and Tootsie Roll is definitely one that I really enjoy this. What about you?
It's very, and I describe this for like, it's peaty. It is very Irish whiskey, but it's not overpowering like a Johnny Walker can be. Where if you're going from a bourbon to an Irish whiskey like Jameson and such, it's not overpowering. It's a good change. If you were wanting to try to find something that you have a friend that's not into bourbon necessarily, but he's into Irish whiskey like Jameson, Redbreast, and such, this could be one that you could both enjoy.
Definitely. On a rating scale, where would you put it?
It's tough because it's very Irish whiskey-ish, more than bourbon. It's tough for me to find room for it on my bench, in my bourbon shelf. I don't know if it's a fair comparison. One more swig.
I enjoy it.
It's good. It's not bad. It is definitely just not. It's not bourbon.
Right.
It doesn't have a bourbon taste. It might be mixed Irish and bourbon, but there's not much. It's a good Irish whiskey in my opinion. If we were rating it as an Irish whiskey, I would say this is one I would enjoy, being not a strong Irish whiskey guy.
I'm gonna say bench player. For those of you who are just joining in and haven't listened to our reviews before, we have 5 different levels. A bench player you may think is a knock, but it's not. It's really hard to crack a starting lineup in baseball on an everyday player. And then it's even harder to become an all-star and then a Hall of Famer. So Hall of Famer's at the top. We haven't rated anything as a Hall of Fame yet. We haven't rated anything as an all-star yet. So I'm putting this as a bench player. This is one that I'm going to have. I think I may consistently have this one out there on my bar shelf. It's one of those that mixes it up. I would definitely bring this to a bottle share to give people something different to try. It's not going to be something that I'm going to every day, that's for sure. I think the mouth feels pretty good. It's got a little bit of a numbing towards the end, which is what I look for. It's not too thin of a pour. Which by looking at it, you would think that that's what it would come through as, but I think it's fantastic. I would give it a bench rating, and that's not a knock. I think what they're doing over there, especially with this Irish plus bourbon at Keeper's Heart, this is something that I would buy a bottle if I saw it. Would you?
Is there a season you would like it at? Is there
Uh,
a particular season? Summer, fall, whiskey, spring, whiskey, winter.
how much whiskey did you have there, Mikey? No. Part of me thinks winter. Like it's a wintry kind of feel to me. It's a mix to me. Like it's really hard to put my finger on.
I feel like the heavy bourbons, the heavy oaky bourbons, you're outside in the fall by the fire. In the winter, you're more inside. So I think that would line up right, with this profile of what it is. But I mean, I would replace this. So I typically keep like Monkey Shoulder is the one I keep of Irish whiskey on the shelf.
Yeah.
I don't have Jameson. I don't keep that Jameson around. Jameson I can't handle. But I can handle the Monkey Shoulder. If this was easily accessible, I would replace it as my go-to Irish whiskey if I wanted that taste profile. Does that make sense?
I think Monkey Shoulder is a Scotch, but I understand what you're saying. This is something it's something different, right? We don't always have something that's different on our shelf. I think this is a fantastic go-to. So that's what I'm going to say. It is $39.99 on Drizzly. From what I saw on Reserve Bar, it is $58.99. So your prices are going to range a little bit. But overall, I think it is a good pour. So a big thank you to Keeper's Heart. You can find them,
Thank you.
Keeper's Heart Whiskey on Instagram, and they also have a pretty good website, so go check that out. As far as us, you can find myself, Brandon Spinner, whiskey_weather on Instagram. Michael, where can they find you?
On Instagram, you can find me, and on Twitter at BNB_Burns.
And we are on Instagram and Twitter when it comes to the podcast. That is Barrels and Barrels Pod on Instagram. Just remove the pod for Twitter, so that's Barrels and Barrels. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. You can always watch videos there, and also email us with any questions. We would love for you to rate us and review us, whether that is over on our streaming platforms or even on YouTube. Everything helps, and we would love to make this the best experience possible for you. So for Michael, I'm Brandon. You can find us again anywhere you find your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and iHeartRadio Podcasts as well. For Michael, I'm Brandon. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks to everyone over at Keeper's Heart.
Let's go.